You know what they say about marriage being like a house? It needs constant maintenance or everything falls apart. Well, I'm Dan Parker, 40 years old, and apparently I couldn't fix a leaky faucet if my life depended on it. At least, that's what my wife Julia reminded me of every single day. Dan, the garbage disposal is making that noise again, she'd call from the kitchen, her voice dripping with that special blend of annoyance and disappointment I'd grown to know so well. Can't you do something about it? I'd look up from my laptop where I was troubleshooting some server issue for my IT support company, and I'd want to say, honey, I can rebuild an entire network infrastructure. But apparently, that doesn't count as being handy. Instead, I'd just nod and add it to the growing list of things I was supposed to fix, but never quite got around to. Julia Parker was 37, a real estate agent with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that could sell swampland to tourists. She was the kind of woman who knew everyone in our small Florida panhandle town, the kind who organized neighborhood barbecues and knew which houses were going on the market before the owners did. She was also the kind of woman who'd married a guy she thought she could change. I'm calling someone, she announced one humid Tuesday morning, her manicured fingers already scrolling through her phone. This house is falling apart, and you're always too busy with your computers. That's how Marcus Bell entered our lives. Marcus was everything I wasn't. 6'2", built like he spent his mornings lifting trucks instead of typing on keyboards, with the kind of easy confidence that made people trust him with their broken things. He showed up that first day in a spotless Ford F-150, toolbox gleaming, wearing a tank top that showed off arms that actually knew what manual labor looked like. You must be Dan, he said, extending a hand that could probably crush walnuts. Julia told me you work in computers. That's cool, man. Different kind of fixing, right? I wanted to hate him immediately, but Marcus had this way about him. Charming, respectful, the kind of guy who called you sir and actually meant it. At least that's what I thought at first. Yeah, different kind of fixing, I agreed, watching as he surveyed our kitchen like a general planning a campaign. Julia hovered nearby, suddenly very interested in home repairs. Marcus comes highly recommended, she said, touching his arm briefly. Kim's neighbor used him, and Tasha's friend said he's amazing with plumbing. Kim and Tasha were Julia's closest friends, two women who treated gossip like a competitive sport and seemed to spend most of their time discussing who was sleeping with whom and who had the nicest lawn. They'd been coming around more often lately, always with stories about this contractor or that handyman, always with knowing looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I'll take good care of you folks, Marcus said, his eyes lingering on Julia just a moment too long. Fix everything that needs fixing. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a regular fixture in our house. The garbage disposal led to the leaky bathroom faucet, which led to the squeaky hinges, which somehow led to Julia deciding our entire back deck needed refinishing. I'd come home from work to find his truck in our driveway, Julia's laughter floating from whatever room he was fixing. He's so helpful, Julia would gush over dinner, and he explains everything he's doing. It's nice to finally understand how things work around here. The subtext was clear. Unlike you, Dan, who can't explain why the Wi-Fi router needs to be unplugged and plugged back in sometimes. My salvation came in the form of El Martinez, our neighbor across the street. El was 38, recently divorced, with dark hair and the kind of sharp wit that could cut glass. She'd moved in 6 months ago, and we'd struck up a friendship based on our mutual appreciation for sarcasm and good bourbon. Not to pry, she texted me one afternoon, but your handyman's truck has been in your driveway for 4 hours. That's either a really complicated repair or he's charging by the conversation. I was sitting in my office downtown, staring at a screen full of error codes when her message popped up. Something cold settled in my stomach. Julia said he was fixing the bathroom tile, I texted back. Ah, well, they're definitely spending a lot of time discussing grout. Elle had a way of saying things without actually saying them. Over the next few days, her observations became more pointed. Marcus's visits were getting longer. Julia was dressing differently, more makeup for someone who was supposedly just going to be around construction dust. The two of them had started having coffee on the back patio, Julia's laughter carrying across the yard like some kind of mating call. I'm probably imagining things, I told Elle one evening when I'd wandered over to her house with a bottle of wine and a head full of suspicions. Honey, Elle said, settling into her porch swing with a glass of Chardonnay, I've been married and divorced. Trust me, you're not imagining anything. Question is, what are you going to do about it? That night, I lay in bed next to Julia, listening to her breathe, wondering when exactly I'd become the kind of husband who got cheated on. She smelled like her usual perfume, but underneath it was something else. Sawdust, maybe, or the kind of sweat that doesn't come from Pilates class. Marcus is almost finished with the deck, she murmured, half asleep. He does such good work. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster I'd never gotten around to fixing, and started planning. The thing about being in IT is that you learn to be methodical. When a system crashes, you don't just start randomly pushing buttons. You gather data, analyze patterns, and document everything. So that's exactly what I did with my marriage. I started small. Instead of working late at the office, I'd park around the corner from our house and walk back through the neighborhood, timing Marcus's visits. Monday, 3 hours. Wednesday, 4.5 hours, with a lunch break that involved Julia, bringing out sandwiches and sitting very close to him on the deck stairs. Friday. I watched through Ella's kitchen window as they shared what looked like a very intimate conversation over beer. This is pathetic, I told Elle, handing her back her binoculars. I'm spying on my own house. You're gathering intelligence, she corrected, refilling my coffee cup. There's a difference. Besides, if you're right about this, you're going to need evidence. Elle had become my unofficial partner in this investigation. She worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, which gave her a perfect view of the neighborhood drama unfolding across the street. More importantly, she understood what it felt like to be betrayed by someone you'd trusted. My ex-husband thought he was so clever, she told me one afternoon as we watched Marcus's truck pull into my driveway for the third time that week. Claimed he was working late, going to the gym, visiting his sick mother. Turns out he was visiting his 25-year-old secretary's apartment. Men think they're so sneaky, but they're really just predictable. I was starting to understand that predictability. Julia had developed new habits. Longer showers, phone calls she took in the garage, sudden interest in home improvement shows. She'd also started criticizing me more openly, as if she needed to justify something to herself. I swear, Dan, sometimes I wonder what I saw in you, she said one evening after I'd failed to properly load the dishwasher to her specifications. You're so passive. Marcus was telling me about this hiking trip he took last weekend. When's the last time you did anything adventurous? I updated our home security system, I offered. That was pretty adventurous. Took me 3 hours to figure out why the motion sensors weren't talking to the main panel. She rolled her eyes. That's exactly what I mean. The security system comment wasn't entirely a joke. I had been upgrading our cameras, ostensibly for home protection, but really because I wanted to know what was happening when I wasn't there. The new system sent alerts to my phone whenever someone entered or left the property. Marcus's comings and goings created a detailed digital timeline that would have impressed any divorce attorney. But I wasn't ready for attorneys yet. I wanted to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. You need to go out of town, Elle suggested during one of our evening strategy sessions. Give them some space. See what happens when they think you're not around. I can't just disappear. I have work. So work remotely. Tell Julia you have to go to Tampa for a client emergency. Stay in a hotel or hell, stay here on my couch. But give them enough rope to hang themselves. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My boss, Mr. Rossner, mentioned that our biggest client was having server issues that might require an on-site visit. Instead of sending one of my technicians, I volunteered to go myself. I'll probably be gone for 3 or 4 days, I told Julia, watching her face carefully for any reaction. Oh. She tried to look disappointed, but I caught the flash of something else in her eyes. Relief? Excitement? Well, I guess I'll have to find ways to keep myself busy. I'll bet you will, I thought. I left on a Thursday morning, making a big show of loading my suitcase into the car and kissing Julia goodbye on the front porch. But instead of driving to Tampa, I checked into a motel about 20 miles away and settled in to monitor my security cameras from my laptop. Marcus's truck appeared in my driveway at 10:47 a.m., less than 2 hours after I'd left. By noon, Elle was sending me text updates. They're grilling burgers on your deck. Very cozy. At 2:15. Still there. Julia's wearing that sundress she bought last month. At 4:30. Truck's still there. Either your plumbing is more complicated than NASA's, or they're not actually working on plumbing. I spent that night in the motel room, staring at security footage of my own house, watching the lights go on and off in rooms where my wife was entertaining another man. The bedroom lights stayed on until nearly midnight. Friday was worse. Marcus arrived at 9 a.m. and didn't leave until after 6 p.m. Elle reported that Julia's friends Kim and Tasha had stopped by in the afternoon, and all four of them had spent time on the back deck, drinking what looked like margaritas, and laughing like they were at some kind of party. They know, I texted Ella. Her friends know what's going on. Of course they know. Women always tell their friends. The question is, are you ready to do something about it? Saturday morning, I made my decision. I drove home. I pulled into the driveway at 11:30 a.m., noting that Marcus's truck was already there. The house was quiet when I walked in through the front door, but I could hear voices coming from upstairs. Julia's voice and Marcus's deeper rumble coming from the direction of our master bathroom. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The bathroom door was open, and I could see them both inside. Julia sitting on the edge of the bathtub, Marcus kneeling beside the toilet, both of them fully clothed but positioned in a way that suggested they'd been sitting much closer just moments before. Dan! Julia jumped up, her face flushing. You're back early! Client emergency got resolved faster than expected, I said, looking between them. What's going on up here? Just fixing a leak in the toilet, Marcus said, standing up and wiping his hands on a towel. Your wife mentioned it was running constantly. Yeah, I said slowly. I can see you brought your tool. The double meaning hung in the air like humidity. Marcus cleared his throat and started packing up his toolbox with unnecessary urgency. Well, I should probably get going, he said. I'll call you about finishing up that deck work, Julia. Julia, not Mrs. Parker. Not you folks. Julia. After Marcus left, Julia busied herself with cleaning up the bathroom, avoiding eye contact. He's been such a help while you were gone, she said, her voice artificially bright. Got so much done around here? I'll bet, I said. That night, I lay in bed pretending to sleep while Julia showered for the second time that day. When she finally came to bed, she smelled like soap and guilt, and I knew with absolute certainty that my marriage was over. The only question now was what I was going to do about it. You know what's funny about betrayal? Once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Every smile becomes suspicious. Every casual comment becomes loaded with meaning. Every I love you sounds like a lie wrapped in habit. Julia and I fell into a strange routine over the next few days. She'd act like the devoted wife, asking about my work and making my coffee just the way I liked it, while I'd nod and smile and pretend I didn't know she was texting Marcus when she thought I wasn't looking. It was like we were both actors in a play neither of us wanted to be in. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening when I was in the garage, supposedly organizing my tools, but really just trying to find some space to think. Elle appeared in the doorway, holding 2 bottles of beer and wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize as her time to stop being pathetic look. Okay, enough, she said, handing me a beer and settling onto my workbench. You've been moping around for a week like a kicked dog. Either you're going to do something about this situation, or you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering what your wife and her handyman are doing in your bed. What exactly am I supposed to do? Confront them? Hire a divorce lawyer? Key his truck? Well, the truck thing's not a terrible idea, Elle said thoughtfully, but I was thinking something more comprehensive. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of photos she'd been taking from her kitchen window. Marcus and Julia on the deck sitting close together. Marcus and Julia in the backyard, his hand on her lower back. Marcus and Julia through the kitchen window, her hand on his chest as he leaned against the counter. Elle, you've been busy. Honey, I'm divorced and work from home. This is better than cable TV. She swiped to the next photo. But here's the thing. I did some research on your boy Marcus. She'd found his business license, his social media profiles, even his address. Marcus Bell, licensed contractor, lived in a small apartment complex about 15 minutes away. His Facebook page was full of photos of his truck his work projects, and himself shirtless at various beaches and construction sites. He's not just fixing houses, Ella continued. Look at this. She showed me a series of posts where Marcus was tagged by different women, all praising his excellent work and personal attention to detail. The comments were full of winking emojis and suggestions that his services went well beyond home repair. Son of a bitch is running a side business, I muttered, and your wife is just his latest client. Question is, are you going to let him keep operating or are you going to shut down his little enterprise? That's when Elle and I started planning what she dubbed Operation Homewrecker. The first step was intelligence gathering. Elle volunteered to befriend some of the other women who'd hired Marcus, under the pretense of needing work done on her own house. Within a week, she'd uncovered a pattern. Marcus targeted married women whose husbands traveled for work or spent long hours at the office. He'd start with legitimate repairs, then find excuses to extend the jobs, building relationships that often turned physical. He's not just a cheater, Elle reported during one of our evening strategy sessions. He's a predator, and he's been using Julia's real estate connections to find new clients. She's been referring him to her friends and customers. That revelation hit me harder than the affair itself. Julia wasn't just betraying our marriage, she was actively helping Marcus expand his operation. I was funding my own humiliation. Time to turn the tables, Elle said. Step 2 involved creating a fake client. Elle's friend Rebecca lived in one of the expensive waterfront neighborhoods where Julia often showed houses. Rebecca agreed to call Marcus about a major renovation project. New deck, bathroom remodel, kitchen upgrade. The kind of job that would require multiple days and pay enough to make Marcus cancel other appointments. I need someone reliable, Rebecca told Marcus over the phone, while Elle and I listened on speaker. My friend Elle recommended you, said you do excellent work. Marcus took the bait immediately. They scheduled a consultation for the following Thursday, the same day Julia had mentioned that Marcus was coming to finish some work on our deck. Step 3 was where things got creative. You want to hurt him where it counts, Elle explained as we sat in my garage, planning like generals before a battle. For a guy like Marcus, that's his truck, his reputation, and his ego. We're going to hit all 3. The truck was parked in our driveway every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. Marcus was proud of that F-150, detailed it every weekend, posted photos of it on social media, probably spent more on truck accessories than I spent on groceries. It was his mobile advertisement, his symbol of masculinity, his calling card. Ella had researched some creative, non-permanent ways to make Marcus's life uncomfortable. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage, but definitely something that would make a statement. Shrimp heads, she announced triumphantly. It's July in Florida. We fill his cab with shrimp heads, and by the time he gets back from Rebecca's fake job, his precious truck is going to smell like low tide in hell. That's actually diabolical. I prefer poetically just. But we're not stopping there. Elle had also procured several packages of the cheapest, smelliest fish she could find at the seafood market. Her plan involved carefully placing them in strategic locations around Marcus's truck, under the seats, in the air vents, taped to the undercarriage, where they wouldn't be immediately visible but would create a lasting, aromatic impression. The beauty of it, Elle explained, is that it's not vandalism. We're not damaging anything. We're just redecorating. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of humid heat that makes Florida summers legendary. I called in sick to work, which wasn't entirely a lie. I was sick of being played for a fool. Julia left early for a property showing, kissing me goodbye with the same fake smile she'd been wearing for weeks. Marcus is coming by later to finish the deck, she said. I should be back by evening. Take your time, I told her. I'll probably spend the day working in the garage. At 9 a.m., Marcus's truck pulled into the driveway. At 9:15, Rebecca called him about an emergency with her renovation project, a water leak that needed immediate attention. By 9:30, Marcus was driving away, leaving his toolbox on our deck and promising Julia he'd be back in a few hours. That's when Elle and I went to work. We moved fast, wearing gloves and trying not to breathe through our noses as we strategically placed our aromatic surprises throughout Marcus's truck. Elle had also brought plastic wrap, which we used to create a nearly invisible barrier under the seat cushions, trapping the smell where it would do the most damage. This is either the most juvenile thing I've ever done, or the most brilliant, I said as we finished up. Can it be both? Ella grinned, taking photos of our handiwork. Besides, we're not done yet. The final touch was a handwritten note, left on Marcus's windshield. Smells like success, doesn't it, Marcus? A concerned neighbor. By the time Marcus returned 3 hours later, his truck had been baking in the Florida sun with our special editions. Elle and I watched from her kitchen window as he approached his vehicle, saw him stop suddenly, his nose wrinkling. We watched him open the driver's door and immediately step back, his hand covering his face. The string of profanity that followed was audible from across the street. Marcus spent the next hour trying to locate and remove all of our surprises, growing more frustrated and more pungent by the minute. Neighbors started coming outside to see what the commotion was about. Someone started filming with their phone. That's when I made my appearance. I walked across the street slowly, hands in my pockets, wearing my most innocent expression. Hey, Marcus, everything okay? I heard some shouting. He turned to face me, sweat streaming down his face, his clothes reeking of seafood and rage. Someone put fish in my truck, he said through gritted teeth. Shrimp heads, sardines, some kind of sick joke. That's terrible, I said, managing to sound genuinely concerned. Who would do something like that? I don't know, but when I find out, you'll what? The question came out harder than I'd intended, and something in my voice made Marcus look at me more carefully. I'll make them pay for cleaning my truck, he said, but his tone had lost some of its anger. Well, I hope you figure it out, I said. By the way, Julia mentioned you were supposed to finish our deck today. She's going to be disappointed if you have to reschedule because of this situation. Marcus looked at his truck, then at me, then back at his truck. The smell was getting worse as the day heated up, and a small crowd of neighbors had gathered to watch the spectacle. Yeah, he said finally. I think I need to deal with this first. He drove away in his stinking truck, windows down, leaving a trail of confused neighbors and the lingering scent of low tide. Ella appeared at my elbow, grinning like a cat who'd caught a particularly fat mouse. Phase 1 complete, she said. How do you feel? I watched Marcus's truck disappear around the corner, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. A real smile. I feel like we're just getting started. The video went viral on our neighborhood's Nextdoor app within 6 hours. Mrs. Henderson from 2 streets over had captured the entire shrimp incident on her phone, including Marcus's creative use of profanity and his desperate attempts to defish his truck. The post was titled, "Local Handyman Has Fishy Day," and had already received 47 comments by the time Elle showed it to me that evening. Oh my God, is that Marcus Bell? Wrote someone named Jennifer Real Estate Pro. He did work at my house last month. So unprofessional. I hired him too, added another comment. Overcharged me and left a mess. This is hilarious. Karma's a bitch, wrote a third person, followed by 3 laughing, crying emojis. Julia came home that evening in a mood I couldn't quite identify. She seemed agitated, distracted, checking her phone every few minutes and pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal. How was your day? She asked, but her attention was clearly elsewhere. Quiet, I said. Marcus never showed up to work on the deck. Did something happen? She paused in her pacing. He had some kind of problem with his truck. Had to cancel. What kind of problem? I don't know, Dan. Something about it smelling bad. She shot me a look that was almost suspicious. You didn't see anything unusual today, did you? Just Mrs. Henderson taking videos of something across the street. You know how she is with that phone of hers. Julia's face went pale. Videos? That's when I knew she'd already seen the Nextdoor post. The affair might have been secret, but Marcus's humiliation was now public knowledge, and Julia was smart enough to understand what that meant for both of them. Over the next few days, the ripple effects began to spread. Elle, who had a talent for social media warfare, made sure the video found its way to other neighborhood groups and local Facebook pages. She also started leaving carefully crafted comments on Marcus's business page. Nothing directly accusatory, just helpful observations like interesting approach to customer service and hope he's learned to check his vehicle before visiting clients. But the real damage was happening in Julia's professional circles. Real estate is a reputation-based business, and Julia's association with Marcus was becoming a liability. Her friend Kim called on Saturday morning, and I could hear both sides of the conversation from the kitchen. Jules, people are talking, Kim's voice carried through the phone. That video is everywhere, and everyone knows you've been using Marcus for work. Tasha's neighbor is asking if you knew about his other services. What other services? Julia's voice was sharp. Come on, Jules. Half the women in this town have stories about Marcus Bell. You can't tell me you didn't know. There was a long pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Right. Look, I'm your friend, so I'm going to be straight with you. People are starting to connect dots. Marcus, your house, Dan being out of town all the time. You need to distance yourself from this situation before it gets worse. After Julia hung up, she sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at her phone. I pretended to be reading the newspaper, but I was watching her face, seeing the moment when she realized her perfect little affair was turning into a public scandal. I'm going out, she announced suddenly, grabbing her purse and keys. Where? I need to talk to someone. She was gone for 3 hours. When she came back, her eyes were red and her makeup was smudged. I didn't ask where she'd been, but Ella texted me later with a photo of Julia's car parked outside Marcus's apartment complex. Damage control meeting, Ella's message read. This should be interesting. Elle was right. The next few days brought a new level of drama to our quiet neighborhood. Marcus showed up at our house on Tuesday morning, his truck still faintly aromatic despite what must have been professional cleaning. He knocked on the front door with the kind of aggressive urgency that made me check the security camera before answering. We need to talk, he said when I opened the door. About what? About what happened to my truck. About the video. About whatever game you think you're playing. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, noting that several neighbors were suddenly finding reasons to be in their front yards. I'm not sure what you mean, Marcus. Are you accusing me of something? I'm saying that coincidences like this don't just happen. My truck gets vandalized the same day I'm supposed to work at your house, and suddenly there's a video of it all over social media. That does sound suspicious, I agreed. Have you called the police? The question caught him off guard. What? Well, if someone vandalized your truck, that's a crime. You should file a report. I'm sure the police would be very interested in investigating. They might even want to interview people, ask questions about why someone would target you specifically. Marcus's jaw tightened. He was smart enough to realize that involving the police would mean scrutiny he couldn't afford. Questions about his business practices and his relationship with his clients' wives. Just stay out of my way, he said finally. I'm not in your way, Marcus. I'm just a guy who works in IT, remember? I can't even fix a leaky faucet. He started to respond, then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he turned and walked back to his truck, his shoulders rigid with barely controlled anger. That's when I knew I had him. Elle and I spent that evening planning Phase 2 of our campaign. If Phase 1 had been about humiliation, Phase 2 was about exposure. He's been scamming people, Elle said, spreading out printed copies of social media posts and online reviews she'd been collecting. Look at this pattern. He quotes one price, then finds unexpected problems that double or triple the cost. Always targets women whose husbands aren't around to question the charges. She'd also discovered that Marcus wasn't properly licensed for some of the electrical and plumbing work he'd been doing. He's got a general contractor's license, but some of these jobs required specialized permits he doesn't have. So we report him? We could, but I have a better idea. Elle's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of reporting Marcus to the authorities, we were going to let his victims do it themselves. She'd created a fake Facebook group called Local Contractor Reviews and Warnings and started inviting women who'd hired Marcus to share their experiences. The response was immediate and damning. Story after story of overcharging, unnecessary work, and inappropriate behavior. One woman posted photos of electrical work that had failed inspection. Another shared invoices showing how Marcus's simple repair had somehow required $3,000 worth of additional materials. But the most damaging post came from a woman named Carol, who lived in the upscale neighborhood where Julia often showed houses. Marcus Bell did work at my house last spring while my husband was deployed overseas, Carol wrote. You know what started as fixing a bathroom faucet turned into him suggesting I needed a whole new vanity, then offering to work out a payment plan that involved a lot of personal attention. When I told him I wasn't interested in anything beyond professional services, he suddenly found more problems that needed expensive fixes. I ended up paying twice what I should have for work that another contractor said was completely unnecessary. Ladies, be careful with this one. The post received dozens of comments from other women sharing similar experiences. Within 48 hours, the Facebook group had over 200 members, and Marcus Bell's reputation was in ruins. But Elle and I weren't finished yet. Time for the grand finale, Elle announced on Friday evening, showing me a flyer she'd designed on her computer. Tomorrow's the neighborhood block party for the 4th of July. Perfect opportunity for a little community education. The flyer was masterfully crafted, professional looking, but devastating in its content. Protect your home and family. It read at the top, followed by a summary of Marcus's business practices, links to the Facebook group, and a list of warning signs that homeowners should watch for when hiring contractors. We're going to make sure everyone at the party gets one of these, Elle said. By Monday morning, Marcus Bell won't be able to get work in this town. What about Julia? I asked. Elle's smile turned predatory. Oh, honey, we're just getting to the good part. The 4th of July block party was an annual tradition in our neighborhood, the kind of event where everyone brought folding chairs and casserole dishes and pretended to be more patriotic than they actually were. This year, it was being held in the park at